Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Spirit and Soul podcast. I am your host, Tiffany Cohen, and today we are talking about the cost of living an unintentional life. This is something that when I asked the universe, what does everybody need to know right now in this moment? And honestly, in my mind, I was really thinking about doing an episode on, getting ready for the new year and things like that. And I just couldn't shake this feeling of this topic of living, how we live unintentional lives and what it's really doing to us. So let's dive right in. Before I became, the owner of Spirit and Soul Studio, and before I really went on my entrepreneurial journey, I can really say that I was living a completely unintentional life, right? Like I was doing all the things that I thought I should be doing. I was doing the things that I, was told that we should be doing as part of being a person in this society, right? I was going to college and I met my soon to be husband and I, got married and I had kids and I got a great job and I did all the things that I should have been doing. And these things were, besides really meeting my husband with that, which that was a magical story in itself. So I feel like it was actually unintentional because I wasn't looking to be with anybody in the moment. However, it was intentional in the way that I recognized the magic in it. So I can tell that story a little later, but the rest of it was really living an unintentional life. Like I went to college, I did all the things, I got a good job, I started to climb the corporate ladder, I had my children, again, another magical experience. But I just did like checking the boxes is what really I'm trying to get at here. And at the end of the day, when I look back at my life, I was just living it on a hamster wheel, getting up every day, doing the same exact thing over and over again, making time and space for family, making time and space for friends, and really just, being in a life that most of it I loved, and then a giant chunk of it I did not. And once I started to tune back into myself and remember who I was as a soul, as a spiritual being, which is something that I was exploring for most of my teenage years, I started to remember again. I started to like really get intentional and start asking myself questions. Like I feel like we go through life and we're like, don't ask ourselves questions anymore. We're just doing the things, right? Like we're not asking ourselves, how do I feel with this right now? How does this feel right to me? Does this feel good? It's like almost like those questions people don't want us to ask ourselves. And as I started to ask the questions, like, what do I want? What do I like? What do I want? I started to go on a journey of what felt good for me, of like the things that I didn't want to see in my life, the people in my life that were maybe super negative, that were bringing me down, that were holding me back, that weren't allowing me to dream really big. And I started to go on this beautiful exploration of who I was in this lifetime. And I recognize that now. I started to explore goddesses and angels and different, energies that I could work with. And at the end of the day, I started to connect back to my soul more deeply than I ever had before. And in so doing, I saw life differently. I saw life as really starting to live more in the present moment, even though I had dreams, right? So that dreaming is looking towards the future. But even though I had these big, beautiful dreams, I could still really be in the present moment because I was remembering who I was as a soul, like what I was meant to do here. And as I started to continue to dive deeper and deeper and deeper, I realized that there are practices that I could do in this modern life, right? Because at the end of the day, we are here in 2024, 2025, where whenever this podcast episode is going to air, and we are in this modern world. And yet there is a part of you inside that is longing for those ancient practices. It's longing for the ritual. It's longing for the deeper intention. And we can make parts of our day, throughout our day, a remembrance to that, a connection point back into the soul, a connection point back into the ancient part of ourselves. And I started to do that. And I started to do it just in little ways. I started to connect back, and the little ways began with gratitude. So when we are living an unintentional life, we are not seeing the things around us and we're not grateful for them. They pass us by very easily. We could see a beautiful sunset and be like, oh, well, there's a sunset every day, right? That's not being in gratitude. That's not looking at the beauty around you and allowing the beauty to actually penetrate through your energetic field, to hit your heart space and be like, wow, like this is a miracle, to see it for the miracle that it actually is. Yeah, the sun rises and sets every day. But you know what? You get limited amounts of sunsets and sunrises. You get a limited amount, but we take them for granted. And when we are not living in this energy of intention, we will just see it as another one, another sunrise, another sunset. And I started to really understand what it meant to be in the present moment as I started to do these little things. So gratitude for sunrises and sunsets, gratitude for, my coffee in the morning. That was like a biggest thing. And I use this as an example a lot because I want to bring people's attention to it because it's so small. It's such a small thing, but think about the joy that you have when you take that first sip and it's made perfectly. Like, think about that first sip of coffee, or maybe for you, it's tea in the morning, where it just hits a place for you that almost like brings you alive again, and not through the caffeine, but through like the taste, or through the warmth, or whatever it is that comforts you in that way. Maybe for you, it's matcha, right? Like maybe for you, it's the ritual of actually making matcha. Like all of these things you can create into the most beautiful ritual and be in it for that moment, knowing that your body is going to ingest these things, and you can either ingest it with a whatever attitude, with a whatever energy, or you can ingest it with a higher vibration frequency of gratitude, of like being present to it. So that's like the example that I like to give all the time, because it is one that we overlook often, is as the things that are as simple as your perfect cup of coffee in the morning. So in living a more intentional life, we start to tune into the things that bring us joy. This is especially important if we feel like we're going through a period of anxiety, if you feel like you're going through a period of depression, of, anger, like maybe you're sitting in anger, maybe somebody did something to you, or you had an experience that wasn't pleasant, and it's going to be hard for you, or it's going to feel challenging for you to try and find, like, to see the things that make you happy. But we can start with the small things as we become intentional and tune in. Maybe you are having a bad day that day. Maybe you are angry about things, but then you take that first sip of your coffee and it hits different, right? It can add that little bit of joy into your life, and little bits add up. Little things add up. And suddenly what happens is you find yourself not so much in that bad day, not so much in that low vibration frequency, not so angry, maybe a little bit happier that day, maybe a little bit more calm, right? As you start to tune into the things that bring you joy. But the things that bring us joy are not so obvious sometimes. Like, it's not as simple as laughing with a friend. Yes, that brings you joy. Yes, we can tell because you're laughing, right? But finding and tuning into the things that make you deeply joyful or deeply grateful, that can be a little bit more hidden. And if you are on a journey right now or if you're saying to yourself, like, I don't even know who I am, I can't tell you how many clients come into Spirit and Soul, and I'm like, what lights you up? And they're like, I have no idea. I can't tell you how many people. And maybe now as I'm saying it, you're like, you know what? I don't know what lights me up either. I don't know what makes me happy. It's because you've been so tuned out to the world around you, to the beauty of the world around you, to the little things that you are glossing over, like those little things that make you happy. You're not even recognizing them. So hopefully, as I'm saying these words and as we're tuning in, you can see how maybe your favorite song brings you joy, or maybe when, your kids' laughter, right? Or maybe it's your favorite blanket, like cozying up with your favorite blanket and like remote in hand, ready to binge your favorite show, right? Like maybe those are the things that bring you comfort and they bring you joy, and you're just thinking that it's like a normal part of your day. But as you tune in, suddenly that blanket feels a bit more cozy, and the moment seems to stop in time because you've created the intention. Like, I love this. And when I get cozy, like, I am so appreciative of this blanket. I'm so appreciative of the fact that I have time, unbothered time to sit and watch my favorite show. Right. So these are the moments here that when you're not living intentionally, you just think it's part of every day. And then when you talk about what you did, let's say, like, okay, somebody asked you, what did you do yesterday? You're just like, I watched TV, right? Instead of being like, I cozied up, I got my favorite blanket and I watched my shows and I just had the best night. And when you start talking like that, it adds more flavor to your life than just, I watch TV, right? It starts adding more flavor, but it wouldn't add the flavor unless you were tuned into the emotion and the energy of it. So I know that when someone asks me like, oh, like, what'd you do? Like, if I was feeling it in that moment, like was sitting and right now I'm watching The Chosen. So like, I cozied up and I was watching The Chosen with like a cup of tea. Like, I tell them exactly what brought me joy in that moment because I can do that. It's readily available to me. So I want these things to start to become readily available to you because you're tuned in and intentional with them. Okay. So other things that are coming at the cost of you not living an intentional life is like your deeper spiritual practice. I'm a believer that, listen, you can sit down at any moment and yes, you can have a beautiful meditation, but there's something about the ritual for me. Okay. I know that some people don't agree with that. This is my truth. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. But for me, there's something about lighting a candle, lighting up some incense, the smell of, my cinnamon incense that reminds my body of something, like something magical is about to happen. It reminds me of what's to come, of an ancient part of me. And it could even, if you allow it to, bring you back to those visions, those moments that your soul has had in the past. And I love to, use my crystals and have the crystals hold those vibrations steady for me and get really intentional and not just like sit down for 5 minutes and listen. Sometimes that's all I have, but I really try to, even if I have 5 minutes, to like light up an incense and give myself at least that moment, that cleansing smoke, that reminder of who I am in those 5 minutes, make it as deeply ritualized and intentional as possible with the time that I have. So it's not just like, okay, meditated, check it off my list for today, And what we do here is then you're creating an energy. I feel like this anyway, that when I meditate like this, or when I sit in, even journaling like this, or I sit and create a vision board like this, or I don't know why coloring is coming to mind, but create art like this. When I start to ritualize it, I can call back to that energy when I need it. I can call back to that energy when I feel like I'm busy the next day. I can call back to it and be reminded of the altar that I created. And maybe the altar that I created was just within my own self, within my own soul, within my own body. But I can call back to that energy and have it remind me of of that moment, of that calming, peaceful moment, of the moment that I connected to my soul, to my truth, maybe to the divine, if I was working with angels or my spirit guides that day, right? Like, these are the things that when we do this work, we start to create a sense of peace throughout the day, really creating like this inner peace. And for me, that's really important. I remember when I was in corporate America, and I could tell you that there was so much stress, like the deepest stress, crying every day leaving, feeling like I just like my head was going to explode, knowing like the feeling of mounting work on my desk, like just nonstop. I was also managing like a huge amount of people. And then of course, when you're managing anybody, you're taking, their responsibilities, their burdens, their things that they're going through in their life on with you as well. And it's like everything was like on my shoulders. And I remember that feeling of never feeling like peaceful. Like I had moments of it when I would be home, but throughout my work day, which is like where I was spending most of my day, I was finding it very hard to sit in peace. Someone's always watching you, whatever it is. And as I started to get deeper into my practice and was still in corporate America, I remember that I could very easily, it started to become a thing where I could very easily just detach from it and not be in that world. Like I could not be in the stress. I could find a deeper sense of peace. I could not be rattled as easily anymore because I had that strength within and I could call back. I could remember myself sitting in meditation and feeling a power that was within me. It wasn't outside of me, it was within. So when we start to really create these rituals and live more intentionally in these different ways, we create this deeper sense of inner peace. This is why, we don't at Spirit and Soul, we don't just do classes because it goes beyond that, right? There's even in the classes, each teacher is creating an experience for you. They're giving you crystals to hold. They're using incense. They are walking you through a meditation. They're adding to an experience. So not only are you gaining this beautiful knowledge, but you're also creating an energy that you can call back to, a remembering of these things when you need them most. When you need them most. So this is what these ritualized practices do in this life. So it's not just about the classes, it's also the retail component, because what calls to you, what lights you up, what lights me up may be different than what lights you up. What makes you feel grounded, what makes you feel like you are connected, right? And for you, that may be your pendulum and, a great affirmation deck. For me, it may be crystals and, an oracle deck, right? Like, and some incense. That may be my thing. For another person, it could be like a delicious cup of ritual tea and, sitting down and meditating, from the app or whatever, right? Like there's so many different things that are going to speak to you in all different ways. And you have to go on the journey, which is how fun, to explore what those things are. But if we're not ever asking the questions of what do I like, right? Like what lights me up? What actually stresses me out? What doesn't make me feel good? What don't I like? When you don't ask yourself those questions, you don't allow for yourself to really be this, I don't know, what's the word? I don't want to say soulful being, but you don't allow yourself to tap into that ancient part of you that is longing for it. It's longing for ritual. It's longing for you to sit in gratitude. You don't need anything to sit in gratitude. You just need to be present. Right? Like there is just such beauty in living an intentional life. And you can add, I just, touched on a couple of different things here, but there's so many things that you can do to live an intentional life. And at the end of the day, like what I always say about manifesting your best life is that My formula for manifesting your best life is intentional manifesting. So, like manifesting, it's also healing. So, doing your healing work and understanding where you're blocked and working through those things and the willingness to do so. And then it's also the intentional living, because the intentional living is the aligned action. It's the things that keep you aligned with the manifestations, with the healing work. It's those things that keep bringing you back over and over again and lifting the vibe higher and higher and higher until you reach your biggest and best life, until you've created the reality that you want to see. So I urge you today, with everything that you can, take one step, even if it feels like a lot. Like I gave you a lot of ideas today. I gave you a lot. I know that. And if you haven't been doing these things, this is going to feel like a lot. But as you take one step, you'll realize that one step made you feel really good and it took no time at all. And then you're going to take another step. And then you're going to take another step, and you're going to realize that you've just stacked a bunch of the things that I spoke about, and it took nothing away from your day. In fact, it actually added to it. It added a sense of gratitude and joy and maybe love to your day. So, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Spirit and Soul podcast. I hope that you take one step, and you know what? I want to hold you to it. I want to hold you to it, because what I want you to do is a little homework. I want you to declare on Instagram at Spirit and Soul Studio. I want you to declare what is one intentional thing that you will start doing that will start to raise your vibration and start to get you into an intentional life. Because the cost of an unintentional life is I'm going to say it. It's a life that is not well lived. It's just lived on autopilot. And my friends, that's not why we're here. Okay? So make your declaration to us. What are you going to do that lives you a little bit more in intention? And I can't wait to hear all about it. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next time.